Hello, Finxters. I'm really excited to share with you guys about uh, the website I built in ChatGPT. I'm super excited because I love playing around with the technology, and I was also to create a site that worked and created website prototypes. So I really wanted to learn more about this technology, and the way I did it was through a practical project. And I'll show that to you first. And I also wrote an article that's in Finxter. Um, So the code is right here on Replit. I used the Replit IDE, which was very useful. And I'll just show you how it runs first, and then I can explain the code. Um, so basically what you can do here is you can enter a prompt, like a, and this creates websites, create HTML website that um, shows a ball bouncing up and down and uses JavaScript to do so. Sometimes it's hit or miss. Let's see what it generates. It's kind of a random draw to the left, but that's part of the one of the things that makes this technology so I don't know um, curiosity and make it very curious. So you can see like there's this ball bouncing. Um, let's see, save, bounce. Okay, now I'm gonna go to a new web page. Page loaded. You can see that ball. And here I'll show you some of the other pages. Here's Pong. Here's a Pong game. And here's the that I created just by going to the website and entering a prompt. And this was that was the prompt. Just create a HTML Pong game with JavaScript and AI, and it created it. And then I just click on this link, and it goes to the website. Here's another one that's an address form. Um, so you can quickly just create the website by entering text. So it's text to code basically. And then you can view the text by going back to here. I mean, you can view the code that was generated by the text, and the code's right here. And this is all something you can do with the Chat GPT, but this interface expedites the experience and makes it so you can just load right away whatever you typed in. So you can quickly see the output. You don't have to copy and paste anything. It's just right to the site. And this is all done client side. It's not saved in any database. So it's only on your computer. So you don't have the security concern of code, you storing code that other people have generated. Then you can also change, I'll do Kevin's Pong game. You can change some text here. Balbon's Kevin. If you do this for Pong Kevin, we'll have this new Pong Kevin. You can click here and you'll see you can change the HTML too. So it's a very quick way um, to play with this uh, GPT-3 API and create websites. So as far as how practical it is, the site, I really don't know. I don't know if you could expand upon it. One thing I've thought of is you could save it to like GitHub or another repository. It might be have some practical value, but it's definitely a practical has practical value in learning how to code using this Chat GPT. I learned a lot in how to use the technology, and here I'll share that with you. So basically, just to back up and explain what ChatGPT is, it's a large language model. It's generative, pre-trained transformer. People have trained it um, on lots of text, and it's also had reinforcement learning and review. This version that people have reviewed it and labeled things to make sure that the outputs were good or not. So it's been trained. Basically, it's been trained by people. Um, and there's some great articles on it. One of my favorites was on Stephen Wormfram's article on how and why it's so great. This is all in the article. The links are there. Um, but basically, I through creating this application, I learned about just how powerful the technology was and how great it is for writing code. So I show some example prompts here of what you can put in that website. The web URL is right here. And what I did to create it, which I view as the most interesting thing, is I went to ChatGPT and I just put some simple prompts. I wasn't familiar with Flask, so I put in a Flask how to create a server, how to create a Flask site that uses Ajax plus the server, and that gave me information on how to create code that I then just copy and pasted and then modified. I had to make quite a few modifications, but the core structure of the code was just taken from this. And then to learn the actual was just taken from ChatGPT. And then to learn like kind of the actual background of what Flask is and everything, I looked at quite a few Finxter articles, but I just I just briefly skimmed them, and it took me, like 10 to 15 minutes to get up to speed with the Flask and get it running, which is I consider that pretty quickly. I do have wealth of development experience, but I'm not super familiar with Python and the whole ecosystem. So this really um, expedited my learning by being able to just take code from here to use this in my website prototyper code. So I use this to handle the request. And I copied and pasted this code from the ChatGPT API. I have an API key. And they have a sandbox here. They have an API that you can find. You can show that does some code generation, and you can get API keys. And I found that to be it was very easy to use. And so that snippet that you saw right here was copied from there. And right now I'm just examining the first thing I did, which was creating the backend, the Flask backend. There's just the main pie, and this is all running in Replit, which is an IDE, online IDE, which is extremely useful and has its own little AI built in, a little writer with autocomplete that I found somewhat useful. So from there, there's also another thing that was created was this HTML, and that was also created from ChatGPT. It was just kind of the outline, bare bones, that I modified somewhat, but there's just a prompt, input, output, name, and the basic Ajax structure was just copied from there. So I would say all in all, the code in the main template and the main and the indexed HTML is maybe 60%, 60% just from what ChatGPT generated. So in the basic structure of the code is maybe 95% the same. So it really gives you a good, when you leverage it and just have a prompt and just type over, copy over code, and then edit and modify it, and kind of you're the code reviewer. You have another, you kind of change, and now you're the code reviewer, and you're just reviewing the code rather than writing a whole bunch of code. It can really expedite the process. Um, So throughout this project I just wrote a lot less code, and I spent most of the time troubleshooting and piecing together lots of pieces of, maybe three basic, not lots of pieces, three core pieces of code. And one was that backend, like I showed you, which was this indexed HTML and this main.js, which I hadn't shown you yet, that this takes in the code from, uh, this is what calls the Ajax. Uh, and there's a parse HTML method that just parses all the output that gets returned and parses out what's CSS and what's JavaScript. And it does this because sometimes the JavaScript wasn't always well formed, so I want to make sure it was well formed. So that's that, and then so those two places were just created. So and then I created one more thing. There's one more prompt that I entered in, and the prompt had to do with saving data. That's the prompt I entered: show and save posts. Enter a JavaScript database, and I used Stack Overflow to kind of figure out what technology I should use, and I came up with IndexedDB based on what people were kind of voting and what their opinions were. And I then put in Chat IndexedDB to then save, to show me how to save what I was doing. And so it saves it in the just in the JavaScript store, in your browser. It's client side database, and that's in this post code. Um, and it's just a store of everything. Um, and it'll just show whatever buttons click, all the code or whatever buttons clicked here, so you can kind of see. It also generates the link. Then the link goes to the separate web page, and this is the address form. And then whatever was entered in um, here is the prompt. So that's the original prompt, and that's code. And that's all being stored in the database. So you can see like prompt input, this name, prompt output, it's all being saved here. Um, so, and there are some like safety concerns just with what I'm doing. Uh, if I were to go further with this, there is a safety concern here, but if I were to like save this data in a database, there would be a safety concern if I were to open it up to everybody, because everybody could save web pages on my site, and so you would be stuck with whatever somebody generates. So it's if it's not client side, um, it's not very safe. And this is a Pong game that I just generated through a prompt. I didn't write any code to it. So when you see that kind of stuff, and when you see like that much code being generated, it's quite impressive, and it basically does what I want. So you could easily expand upon it. I mean, it has a basic functional Pong game. So go back. Um, so here is so that was that code, and there's just two main pieces of code. There's quite a bit of JavaScript. It was mostly JavaScript that just interacts with the class backend. And the one thing to note is, in order to create the site, you would just need to fork it from here. You could fork it from here or GitHub. To fork it from here, let's see. You can just yeah, you can just fork it from the home page. You can't see it here, but you can fork it from the home page. it's easy to see on the site. And then I stored one thing you'd have to do to run this is you'd have to get your own key for the Open API token and then save it. Um, so it won't just work if you fork it, but you can play with HTML sites and see it open up in other places. But the real magic you need API token, but that's all you need to get it up and running. Um, so yeah, this technology is super excited. There's a lot that's written about it. The GPT technology that is out there, and what's so exciting is you can just use text to generate code, and anybody can do it. So you can really just go from ideas quickly, um, to code, and you don't have to write as much code, but you do have to be discerning over the code, and the it won't GPT will not string, or I should say yet, maybe in the future, will not put together pieces of code. It'll just generate snippets of code that don't necessarily fit together. So it's kind of your job to um, put the pieces of code together that you generate. So that's kind of where the programmer is. But you don't have to write the mundane code as much. So that's really awesome that I can do that. So yeah, I'm just super excited about using this technology in the future. And yeah, I just see this getting more and more useful, and then it it will help programmers just go to a higher level of code where you don't have to do as much mundane stuff. And yeah, so yeah, I hope you learned something from this. In the article, I go in more depth about the links and the code and how how it's written. So I think this video just really supplements the article. So I highly recommend you going if you're interested going into the article as well. And thanks for enjoying it and joining me on this little code investigation of this website. And yeah, this is I find this extremely exciting, and I hope you do too.